All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday, July 13th, 2023 Airport Advisory Board meeting. We have a quorum, but just to confirm it, Lauren, would you mind calling the roll for us, please?
Chairperson Harrison Earl.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Malcolm Dean.
Here.
Board Member Tallis.
Here.
Board Member Rainier Goltz.
Here.
City Council Member Marcia Martin. Here.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is our first public invited to be heard. I have 3 on the list. I can tell Al Manley, you're on the first on the list. First public invited to be heard. That better? Can you hear me now? Yeah. All right. Al's first on the list, and I apologize. I'll call the other 2, but handwriting is a little tough for me to read. So Al, if you can start with your name and address, have Levi turn on the mic for you. And you have 5 minutes.
Hi, Al Manley, 940 Rangeview Lane, 80501. Just a request, there was a meeting with the, a letter went out to the city council members 6 weeks or so ago requesting a meeting with the county assessor's office. And I did exchange emails with Phil Greenwald about this, and the LOPA members were curious about the outcome of the meeting, the attendees, the tenor of the meeting, et cetera. And we would just like to, Levi was there, and we would just like to have the specifics of the meeting if possible. So that's where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will have the reminder, we're not being rude, but we can't talk back, and there is a time in the meeting that we can address things later on. So, next on the list, it's Bob, and I can't read the last name, and I'm very sorry.
Bob Liner, 1233 Wagon Wheel Court, Berthoud, and we have a business out at the airport. And I have a question as to whether we are getting protection for the airport with navigation easements and point of sale disclosures with all the developments that are off, particularly the east end. And then the second question is, I guess for Levi, and that's, do we have a oil collection facility on the airport now, or is that gone by the wayside? Because that used to be we dump the oil at the FBO, and then the Public Works use the oil for heating. Thank you.
Thank you. Last one on my list right now, Carol?
Carol Liner, 1233 Wagon Wheel Court, Berthoud, and I own a business at the airport. I've been there now for 22 years. And I have to say, the appearance of the airport is worse this year than I've ever seen it in those 22 years. There are weeds along the road going to the main parking area that are 2 and 3 feet high, and they really should be taken down. They make it hard to get to the mailboxes. And the other thing that makes it hard to get to the mailboxes is the box is on a concrete pad about this tall. If you try to drive up, you have to drive up over the edge of the pad to reach your mailbox. If you walk up and it's snowy or there's been a lot of rain, there's a puddle this deep in front of that pad, and it just makes it very difficult. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were the only 3 that were on my list. However, if anyone else would like the chance, we'll have the opportunity. Otherwise, there is the final public invited to be heard at the end of the meeting as well. All right, so seeing no one else, I will close the public invited to be heard, and we'll move on to approval of the May 2023 and June 2023 minutes. Did anyone have any changes or corrections to the minutes? I have one. on page 2, I'm sorry, this is the May 11th, 2023 minutes. Page 2, line 1 says Garber Engineering. It's Garver, Garver. That's the only thing I noticed.
And then I had one too on line, so page 3, line 25. Levi stated it would be more beneficial for the FBO to be city-owned. It should be FBO building to be city-owned, not necessarily for the city to own that business.
Got it. Okay. If anyone else has anything, otherwise maybe a motion to approve with the corrections. Sorry, you can second. Mr. Dean,
I'll make a motion to approve the correction.
is there a second? I'll second. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Tal? Any opposed? Motion carries. Sorry, that was May. June minutes, we didn't really have a meeting.
Yeah.
I don't think there were any corrections. Motion to approve that one as well?
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? I'll second again. Moved and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Levi, updates from the airport manager.
Hi, updates. I guess number one item would be to welcome Rainer, our new board member here, to the Airport Advisory Board. This is his first meeting, so just say welcome to him. Glad to have you on board.
Thank
Had-
you, Levi. Reiner, do you want a chance to introduce yourself quickly? Do you mind?
Sure.
Sorry, Levi.
Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Reiner Getz. I live on Clarendon Drive, east side of the town. I was 20 years Air Force, 16 years FAA, all over the place, all over the world, you know, as you can gather with the Air Force. I was been retired from the FAA for about a year, and I was looking for something to do because I was getting pretty bored at home after being retired for a year. And I just figured, let me volunteer, and I came across a Facebook ad for volunteering, and everything was like, eh. And then I saw airport, I was like, wow, cool, aviation, you know. So that's where my passion lies. I'm just here to help any way I can and, you know, give my time to volunteer, that's all. I love Longmont, I'm gonna stay here pretty much forever, and that's about it. Unless my wife changes that, of course, so, you know.
Thank you, Reiner. It's really, we're glad to have you here with us and appreciate you signing up and volunteering.
Absolutely.
I'll turn it back to you, Levi.
All right, sounds good. Airport updates. Just some general items. Air show status, just give everybody a quick update on that. I talked with Melinda a couple weeks ago, and there was a tentative plan to get a meeting out on the previous Thursday, actually. That wound up not happening. I think maybe she got a little busy and kind of under the gun from all the stuff she's got on this summer. So not a whole lot of movement yet on that. The land survey work, as we've covered at previous meetings, we're supposed to be having a whole survey done at the airport this year. That was originally planned on being completed in June. The surveyor that's been doing that has kind of been pushing things back. I assume he's getting kind of busy. So as of yet, that work has not started out on the airport. That, of course, being important for making sure we get really accurate, you know, parcels and stuff like that. So as we move forward with leases, we got good legal documents, stuff like that. Board recruitment has concluded, as you know, we have just discovered. Let's see, other things I have. A real quick update on wildlife management at the airport, prairie dog control. We have seen over the last 2 weeks a pretty big spike in prairie dog activity on the airport. So that's just to put on your guys' radar, something that we're dealing with. I did put in a request when we were going through the budget process for additional funds to help make sure that we're staying within federal requirements in that department. To my understanding, the city wildlife crew has also put in a similar request for budget monies for the entire city. They're seeing the issues not only at the airport but at other areas in the city that are you know, causing concern. So that is being dealt with. Other items on
Can we
big
pause
items
there for
on-
a second, Levi?
What was that?
Quick question on that one before we
Yes.
go on. Mr. Dean.
Yes, are we going to spend additional money or budgeting for wildlife or prairie dog removal at this point?
I put in a request for additional budget dollars for that, and so did the wildlife facility or the department here at the city. So though I'm sure those two will kind of get merged into the same consideration when they're doing budget approval. But it is something that's been brought up, and hopefully we'll see additional resources put that way.
Do you have any idea of what you think it'll cost right now?
No. So last year, to give you some perspective, for a whole airport treatment to bring us back into FAA standards, it wound up costing $20,000. That's could be worse. Originally, we were figuring about $40,000 based on what the estimates we were getting and stuff like that. It turned out that was less. My thought process is moving forward. Hopefully, it wouldn't be that much as long as we stay on top of it. So I put in my request for at least $2,000 of additional funding per year where I could do at least a single treatment or something like it out there. The wildlife crew I know has put additional thought into their budgeting and stuff like that. And they're considering the airport also.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So Levi, just continuing on that, because you did have the people come out, we spent the 20 grand. Are we thinking you're gonna have to call a contractor back out, or is this city crews can handle what's happening right now?
That's currently being discussed. The original idea was the city crew could handle it if we got a heads up on it. However, so just for example, I'm monitoring very closely. I'm monitoring, of course, the whole airport, but very closely monitoring an area on the south end of the runway that's approximately 400 feet by 60 feet, a square patch of mowed area. 2 weeks ago, there were 2 prairie dog holes, and yesterday there was 21 prairie dog holes in it. So that's a huge spike. So I've started that dialogue with the city guys, said, hey, you said we were going to be priority, and they essentially said, yes, you're a priority, but we're under the gun. Here's the resources that we have, and we're currently, shooting ideas out back and forth on how we can make sure, we stay ahead of it now, and then hopefully we'll get, as mentioned, those additional resources in the future to make sure that this is a non-issue.
Councilmember Martin.
Yeah, just a little local color. When we were fighting the prairie dog fight in 2018, 2019, what we learned was in a wet year, all the prairie dog cubs survive, and so they're just tumbling all over the streets everywhere.
Yeah, that's kind of what the wildlife guys were kind of echoing, is that, we had a rough year last year for some reason, even though it wasn't that wet year, and this year we had a wet year, and then it just made it, they're all over the place. So I'm actually noticing that most of the ones that seem to be on the airfield now are not the larger, older ones. They're little half-sized prairie dogs all over the park. So what I think we got is some of that parent push out that's finding its way to the airport.
Mr. Salamedine.
Yeah, I just had a question about continually doing this type of mitigation versus finding a longer term solution. Totally anecdotal, but when I'm doing a raised bed, I put carpenter's cloth underneath of it.
There are other options. So there's prairie dog fences. Unfortunately, that's not. There actually was a prairie dog fence on the airport before. It was, to my understanding, only for a couple years, and it essentially did nothing. So they actually went back in and tore it all out. From what in my research and my kind of interviews with industry professionals, everyone says they exist if you want to do them, but if you got any expansive area, they say it's kind of pointless. So that's less of an option. Putting barrier down over, the whole airport's not a particular option. We're continuing, open for ideas, of
So
course.
it may not be, feasible unless you think about it in 10-year terms. If you're paying $20,000 a year for mitigation, then very quickly that adds up.
Yeah, it's true, but to my understanding, there's no product that kind of exists that's like that. So we have kind of run the gamut on what products are out there, and we've tried I think all of the ones that the county is willing to allow us to try.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any more prairie dog questions? That's the big things. Have a meeting next week with the FAA regarding some potential grant issues with the development off the east end of the runway. So that's kind of on our radar too. We'll have that discussion. They wrote a letter to the city concerned that an apartment complex on that end might be a violation of grant assurances. So we'll be having that discussion. That's kind of in the beginning stages of, we're having that meeting with the FAA to kind of see what their concern is. So not a whole lot of data on that yet.
Can you talk maybe more broadly about that in the context of navigation easements as well?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Excellent redirect. So, planning development around the airport area, particularly in the airport influence area, is something that I've been pushing for a while to make sure we're getting good navigation easements on, particularly after all the litigation that occurred around Broomfield and the big court case that they lost down there. Nothing wrong with, trying to mitigate some. So in KBJC, Broomfield, Colorado, the airport was successfully sued by, I'm trying to think of the city. I can't think of the city. I think it was at Rock Creek. Anyway, they successfully sued by a city for noise issues. Even though they had navigation easements around the area, they found a loophole in their navigation easement, successfully sued them. And it also is kind of opening up the door for more future court cases that they're having to deal with. So big headache, big expenses for the airport this year. Something, of course, we always want to try to mitigate, try to get ahead on. That's actually one of my first items that I actually did when I got to this position was I reached out to the city's attorney's office and said, hey, can we start moving on some language for navigation easements? Wrote some stuff. We've actually reached out to consultants also to get additional information back on kind of what they think a navigation easement would be. So we have some really good drafts written up for that. Last I saw, it's pretty much in its completed form. Really what we need to do now is just making sure that we're following the correct procedure and making sure we're applying these, getting these applied to the areas that we want to have controlled. And the last conversation we had probably about 2 weeks ago about that, it's just kind of where and what the exact, exact steps that we need to do to make sure through the city system that we're getting those, approved by the council and stuff like that. Make sure we can kind of move forward with putting navigation easements around the airport. But they are actually written. I've been through them several times. They look pretty solid. We've had lawyers go through them, and they look pretty solid.
Councilmember Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We granted a navigation easement for Mountain Brook development in 2018/19.
Yes.
So-
I've read that one. So the one of the items that came up at one of the previous meetings was like, hey, over the years, we've used actually a few different navigation easements in the area. And it was kind of brought up as, hey, we're kind of applying these ad hoc here and there. Let's, have a standard navigation easement and we apply it in this area and stuff like that. So that's kind of where that whole process is right now. So the process is actually pretty far along. We just got to get, make sure we get the thumbs up from the city to make sure that we can get all those in those developments and stuff like that.
Thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Eltz.
I just wanted to, excuse me, I just want to share a personal example. When I moved into my first house out of the Air Force in Frederick, Maryland, they had exactly that. And I was like, I think 3 miles from Frederick Airport, which is a fairly busy airport because it serves over the national, the DC area and such. And when I bought my house, I had to sign a piece of paper that says, hey, you are aware that there's an airport here, and, you shouldn't expect to sue the state or any public entity down the road because you knowingly moved to an area where you knew there was an airport. To me, I thought it was a positive thing because it was like, yeah, it doesn't bother me. Of course, I lived on an Air Force base with fighters, so that's, that's a bit different. But I'm a proponent of those, and I think they would, if nothing else, help reduce the amount of plane. They may not stop them completely, but I think they will reduce the overall noise abatement, a noise complaint level of, how many you get.
And that, as we move forward, that might be an item that would be an excellent for this board would be, we might want a letter to make sure, we're communicating with the city council, say, hey, this is really important to us. we would like to make sure that we're doing all the correct steps to make sure that these are being applied.
Do you have an approximate timeline when you think that might come up, just since we're
So
monthly
those
meetings?
documents are complete. So honestly, we could start having that conversation anytime. I think I would just want to check, of course, with, the planning crew and stuff like that, making sure that, that there's no obstacles that I'm not thinking of at the moment.
Could we plan to add it on next month's agenda? And
That
if
sounds
if
like
it
a
needs
good
to
idea.
push, we push it, but
Yeah, let's do that. I'll make a list.
that way it can be an action item and we can have a full discussion about it.
Okay.
Thank you. Did you have any other items, Levi?
That was kind of the last item I had on mine list. Yep.
Can I ask you to do the debrief that Mr. Manley requested about the
Yeah,
the meeting?
The meeting itself was pretty short and to the point. In fact, I actually made a request for if I get a copy of the minutes from it, and apparently the meeting was done to give us, some background information. It was a meeting that was held by the county of Boulder. They're the ones that called, invite everyone, stuff like that. And we expressed our interest to talk about it. They set up the meeting. Apparently, they didn't record the meeting and no one took notes on it. So that was a little bit surprising to me. So there were no minutes that they were allowed to or could share with us. The basic kind of tone of the meeting was they didn't think it was necessarily a mistake the way the taxes were applied. And then they said that when we asked, it's like, well, how are we this going to flesh out? How are we going to address this? And the answer was the formal complaint process, which pretty much everyone at the airport applied for. As they said at that point, that's the pre-set up way of, fleshing this all out, and we're just going to follow it that way, is what they said.
Are there any other discussions that you know of that will happen or should be happening?
Not that.
Or are we kind of waiting a little bit for the assessor's office?
Yeah, now it seems like we're kind of waiting for the assessor's office. I mean, we kind of, at the end of the meeting, I asked like, hey, here's the concern of the tenants. What are our options? And that was kind of the one option. Is like, we've got a process set up to handle it, put it through that process.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to just keep on that. I mean, obviously, we asked the city to have that meeting and take place. So I'm glad the city manager took the recommendation of the board.
Yep.
Based on the comments we got, but would like to see that progress
Okay.
beyond just the one meeting. And that's not you, that's the county and everybody else, but would really like us to keep engaged on this. Anyone else have anything for Levi on updates right now? Do we have any information items or not tonight?
Information items. Not that I had in my notes.
Okay. Well, and the only action item we have here is to approve the annual report. So under our bylaws, under the city charter, we have to provide a report to council every year. Our bylaws say we do it in the first half of the year, so we're close. We brought this originally in March. We discussed and talked about trying to add some more into it. We asked for more feedback from anybody. There was no other input, no other feedback came in, so this is the exact same version that we had in March. So unless anyone wants to, suggest anything that we, can redline literally while we sit here, I would certainly suggest we approve it, but very open to any discussion from anyone on the board right now. Then I'd entertain a motion. Vice Chair Dean,
I'll make a motion to approve.
is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the annual report, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. We're moving quick tonight, guys. We're on our final public invited to be heard here. Would anyone who spoke at the beginning or who didn't speak at the beginning is welcome to come up and make any comments tonight. Come on down.
Real short. Bob Liner again from Berthoud. My question is, have you reached out to AOPA with the navigation easement question and the wording? Reason is AOPA deals with it nationwide, and they cover, monitor all the litigation and conflicts across the country. They should be able to give you the best advice as to what is likely to work in the legal system and provide the best protection for the airport. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Keith Griffith, 7066 Johnson Circle in Niwot, and I do own hangars at the airport. I want to talk about the prairie dog issue. This is something that the airport has confronted for literally decades, and I'm surprised that we don't have a contractor on call. When you see 2 prairie dog holes, you know that in a month there's going to be 20 of them. And now the problem is 10 times as bad, and the cost is 10 times as much. So, it's like being surprised that spring came and the grass grew. Of course you have to control the prairie dogs. It happens every year. It has happened for decades. And the fact that we don't have a system set up, a contractor on call, and a way to handle this is just kind of pitiful, pathetic.
Al Manley again, 940 Rangeview Lane, 80501. Just thank you for the minutes from the meeting and the tenor. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Dulce, 335 Pratt Street, Longmont. I have a hangar at the airport also. It's really kind of sad to hear that they're still talking about navigation easements. I recall back when I was on the board, even a little prior to this lawsuit with Mile High Skydiving and Quiet Skies, that there was talk about all the development around the airport. And I happened to be passing by Centennial Airport at the time, and I took a photograph of a sign that is along Arapahoe Road that says that you're entering the airport influence zone. And at that time I was working with a previous airport manager, Tim Barth, and we went and looked around the airport influence zone here in Longmont. And we found about 10 locations, some in the county, some in the city, where a sign could be posted that said, "You are in the airport influence zone." That got accepted by the board to be presented to the city council. And it was presented to the city council along with the photograph. And that was an election year. And they all agreed this is a wonderful idea. And then all that detail just went right into the trash can. And nothing ever happened. But it would be a way to have certainly had people become aware that they were living in an airport zone. I think the concern back then was that the housing values would be depressed by people knowing they were in an airport influence zone or trying to sell a house in that zone. The reality is that didn't happen. Prices just went up. The discussion was carried to the city's legal group, who some of those people I think are still there, and they were working on the navigation easement. And I think it was stated that when a person buys a property within the airport zone, now there is some document that gets signed that they recognize they're in that area. But putting together maybe a better document is the way to go. However, it's pretty depressing to hear that we're back on this topic 10 years later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Steve Kirk, 125 Fairbanks Street. I actually work for the county of Boulder, and I do prairie dog removal for them. My suggestion for barrier fencing option is we do chicken wire fencing. It's a 6-foot chicken wire, and you put an apron on the bottom and like a wrap on the top so the prairie dogs can't get over or under. And I know the city has perk machines. We've actually borrowed some of their perk machines. And if it's just 20 holes can be treated in like an hour. So that's my suggestion. The prairie dogs could be removed fairly quickly, in my opinion. So just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think pretty much everyone had a chance, but I'll do a last call anyway here. Okay. I'll close the final public invited to be heard and move on to board, council, and or staff comments, starting with board members. Vice Chair Dean.
For Levi, I noticed the other day leaving my EA meeting that the gate 2 is really, really rusty, and it took a while to open. The chain is extremely rusty, and it looks like it could use some tender loving care on the mechanism itself.
Okay, I'll put that on my list to check out there.
It opened very slowly when I tried to leave, so
Okay. You perceived it as opening quicker in the past?
yes.
Okay.
And you could hear it. I had my windows down, and you could hear the screeching and the chain kind of binding, so.
Other comments?
I had one item I forgot to cover in the update.
Go for it, please.
Just real quick on mowing, because I forgot a concern was brought up on that. So this year we do have new mowers, and it's been a communication battle, if you will, to make sure that they're mowing what they need to mow. So that is an ongoing process to make sure that they're getting everything they need. We've had to recall them about 4 or 5 times now, and there's still some communication that needs to occur. So, but learning experience.
Vice Chair Dean.
So with new mowers, do we have an estimate on price or what that's going to cost for the year?
Yeah, they estimated approximately $40,000 a year for mowing, which was also something that I put in for the budget for next year. That seems really high to me.
It does.
To my understanding, we've had the hazel bushes on the airfield here mow parts of our fields and stuff like that for hay, which is completely kosher as far as the FAA is concerned and everyone else's. Right now, I am in the middle of trying to get some actual plans on paper, if you will. It seems to be something that was just always kind of done with a handshake and knowledge. So I'm just kind of trying to get that all lined out to make sure that we're staying within FAA guidance and also getting that taken care of. So.
Okay, thank you.
Does that mowing include the weeds that were brought up earlier as well? Or
It's
those-
supposed to.
Okay,
Yeah.
supposed to.
So that was an issue. So yeah, the first thing was like, the biggest thing was that going to like the FBO, like there's that guardrail that's off to your right when you're coming in. So they didn't even touch that, and there was like 5-foot tall weeds. So that was one of the first thing we called them back on, was that, and they were supposed to cut that, and they were supposed to cut the mailboxes, and they didn't cut the mailboxes. So it's back and forth kind of thing with them. So we'll see.
Levi, on Air Show. Recognize that there was talk of doing fly-in this year and a real expo next year. Are we on track at all for even a fly-in this year? Because it feels like the planning seems to have stalled a little bit from my perspective, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong.
It does seem to have stalled a little bit, and kind of the crew, Melinda was kind of heading that up, and last time we talked, I said, again, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and we had a plan to do a meeting, and she said, all right, I'll send an invite. She asked if I'd be available on a Thursday night, and I said, yeah, absolutely, let's do a Thursday night. And she said she's going to send a meeting invite out, and it didn't occur. So the air show board's kind of busy at the moment, so I think that maybe things just kind of got pushed back is what's going on.
Okay. Anyone else have anything? I'm stalling for a second because there was something else I was going to ask you, Levi, that I blanked on.
Oh,
But I'll come back to it if I need to.
all right.
So Levi, any comments from you for staff? Are you good?
Yeah, the only other thing that kind of popped up in my mind, and maybe Marcia can comment on this too is, prairie dog's definitely a concern of mine also, so I'm not sure if maybe it would be prudent or appropriate for the airport advisory board to put something together to send to council just saying, hey, this is important to us, to stay on top of. Just a thought.
I would ask Councilmember Martin if there was any action that the council would need to take at this point, or if it's kind of just staff doing staff's thing.
Yeah, it really is more staff doing staff thing. You could come to council and talk about it. The gentleman back in the back who spoke about prairie dog control, the city of Longmont uses carbon monoxide only for prairie dog control on city lands. We're allowed to make an exception to that, which we did when we had the giant infestation, right? To use, what's it called? Something toxin. Boss toxin, okay, yeah. But we don't have that equipment ourselves. So I don't know what the trade-off is between getting a contractor to come out and exterminate them with poison, or getting the city to come out and use carbon monoxide, which is cleaner and safer for people, but we don't really care about safer for people out there because people don't walk around out there, I assume.
No.
Certainly no daycare centers or anything are out there. But that's what the trade-off is, and so it'd be a question for you to ask, Levi, is whether they can use the equipment that the city owns when it's under 20 holes or whatever.
Okay.
Levi, I just add to that, if you need us to make a recommendation on something, please do. Don't feel like you have to wait for us.
Okay.
And just move forward. But if you need us, we'll have a discussion.
All right, sounds good.
The item I was going to ask you about was budget for next year.
Okay.
I know we're in the planning cycle. In previous years, when the airport has made a request that is substantially different than in past years, we've written a letter to council to kind of explain that request, why it was happening, and recommend a course of action. Is there something this year in the request that would be prudent for us to do something similar on?
Potentially, our mowing costs went from $9,000 to $40,000, so there was a big chunk change. Unfortunately, that's a jump from a gentleman who's been mowing for half his life out there and charging us that rate to the lowest quote that we got for the new people after he retired. So there was a big jump item there. There was also a big jump item in snow removal, an additional $10,000 for that. And that's just plain, we had a reduced, we had more snow last year as compared to the previous, so we kind of guessed what it would be, and it just didn't work out, so there's that item. I've already been having kind of discussions with the finance department here at the city. They're asking me to kind of just take all that money from my repair and maintenance budget because they said I didn't use it last year. And I said, well, that's true. I said, but no, that was my first year here. We were pretty much figuring out what was going on, what needed to be repaired and maintenance. So this year, really, I kind of have all those dollars earmarked on various projects. Bollard installation around the fire hydrants and gas mains that for some reason were never accomplished to bring us up to fire code. Regrading and improvement of the airport perimeter road. It's, looks like a four-wheel drive trail out there. So pretty much all those dollars are kind of already spent, and I kind of tried to explain that to them. But yeah, there's some potential there, and that it certainly would be a benefit, not a detriment.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. I'm not sure entirely how the budget works, but we have had conversations with Joni Marsh about the buildings on the airport that could be repurposed, owned by the airport, specifically for remodeled for an FBO, if I understand it correctly. Does that go in your budget, or does that go in her budget?
Yeah, that's not even touched by our budget. I think what she's talking about there's there's a couple potential things, and I mean, we talked a little bit about it at the last meeting about what's going on with the FBO and stuff like that. One of the items that brought up was, and we corrected in the minutes actually, is perhaps it would be more beneficial for the city to own the FBO building. So that's currently kind of in the middle. I should have done an update on that. I do have a gentleman who is doing an appraisal on the building in the middle of that. So after we get that appraisal back, that'll kind of take wherever that's going into another direction for the city, whether it's something that we could potentially, acquire or not. I'd repurpose. I assume she's talking about potentially repurposing the current hangar I'm in. The FAA's been talking about potentially them wanting us to have a snow removal equipment building. That building certainly be repurposed for that, if need be. The building itself is one of the oldest ones on the airfield, so its value of a hangar, of course, all the hangars are valuable, but that's something that's kind of come up. That would probably include some dollars just to make sure we're bringing it up to whatever safety standard and, usability point that we need to. None of that is in my budget. All that came to pass kind of after I was allowed to submit stuff for the budget. So there was nothing really.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm just, because we, not you and I, but we, other people who push on the airport and use me to advocate for them, I guess, we're talking about taking control of the FBO's situation by applying for grants. And Joni said, we don't need grants to take control of the FBO's situation because she's got money.
Okay.
So my interpretation of that is, well, before it's too late, if let's not miss a window. If that activity needs to go in somebody's budget, let's make sure we understand how it works.
Okay. Right.
So, and again, for me, talking to Joni is like talking to the wizard. I don't always know what she's saying, but there it is. I wouldn't want to miss an opportunity on that.
It's kind of what I discussed with Joni was she says, well, we've got the money kind of sitting in the fund. Like if we needed to acquire this building, we could just go ahead and do it as long as it's the right step moving forward. And that's what got us to getting the appraisal done on the building.
Good.
Yep.
All right, so you're traveling down the road.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'd just ask that we have budget as an kind of standing info item for the next couple of months. I can't remember the timeline for when votes happen on that, and that way we're tracking it at least if we need to.
As things kind
To
of
make a
we hear what's
recommendation.
going on.
Exactly, yeah. Councilmember Martin, I skipped you for just general comments. I think you shook your head at me. So are you good, or do you have any other comments?
I just said my comment.
Wonderful. Last call for board members or city staff on any comments. All right, then we'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone.